We know the Royals have a star at shortstop, but do they have a star in the making at third base? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe the next time you visit our channel. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors, and we're going to have plenty on them throughout the show. But if you're dealing with any car troubles and you're trying to find the right parts, stop stressing about it and just head over to ebaymotors.com. But again, we got more on them coming up in about 15 minutes or so. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Royals channel. If you want to know a little bit more about me, I'm based here in Kansas City, and I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and some producing. So I stay pretty busy in the sports realm, especially here locally with the Chiefs, with KU, K-State, Missouri, and of course the Kansas City Royals. But with this podcast, you know that you were getting 30 straight minutes of just Royals baseball. Sometimes we sprinkle in some Major League Baseball talk just around the league, but typically, and I would say 99% of the time, we're just talking three segments of the Royals, who dropped the series finale yesterday in Baltimore. And I would go as far to say, and it's not going to be a hot take or anything like that, the most infuriating loss of the season so far. We're 6 games in, but there has not been a more infuriating game than that one. You have to wait 5 hours for first pitch. So yesterday, when I got into work and I'm looking at the radar in Baltimore and seeing how long it's going to rain, I'm thinking on a getaway day, they're not playing this game. The Royals have to get back to Kansas City. They've got a game the next day. Baltimore had an off day, so it didn't matter for them. They could travel later on in the day, and they're at home. So it's not like, they're leaving the hotel. They're not, leaving anything that they're not used to. They're leaving the comforts of their own home, wherever they're staying, going to the ballpark. So it doesn't really matter for Baltimore. But for the Royals, they were traveling that day. They were traveling that night, and they had to wait 5 hours for first pitch. They wanted to get that game in. So I guess the positive is there's not going to be some weird, random, travel day they're going to have going to Baltimore when they both have an off day and playing a 9-inning game. They got it out of the way. The Royals are not going back to Camden Yards this season, unless, of course, they were to make it to the playoffs and they would happen to play each other in the bracket. But they'll see the Orioles in 15 days, I believe it is, so roughly 2 weeks. And that'll be it. They'll be done with the Orioles in April. But, man, I know I said taking one game in Baltimore should have been the goal. And that still is the case. I don't feel differently about this team's chances of competing, even though they're 2-4, because they should have walked out of Baltimore with a sweep. I think we can all admit that at this point. They had a 3-0 lead on Monday night. They had a 3-0 lead yesterday. The 3-0 lead was erased in the 5th inning, I believe it was, or maybe it was the 4th inning on Monday night. But the Royals had a bases-loaded opportunity in the 8th inning of that game. They also had 2nd and 3rd, nobody out earlier in that frame. Couldn't score a single run. The Orioles walked them off. Yesterday takes the cake, though, in the series of just pure frustration. Cole Ragans was as dominant as you could be. He's dueling Corbin Burnes, who the Royals offense put together a good game plan against. He gave up 9 hits in 6 innings. The Royals forced him to throw 100 pitches. And he only got 3 strikeouts as well. Now, that's a big-time strikeout pitcher. He had 10, I think, in 6 innings against the Angels in his debut in an Orioles uniform. So the Royals' game plan was good. They had a 3-0 lead, and then the bullpen once again imploded. Cole Ragans went 6 1/3, gave up 1 hit, walked 2, and I think had 7 punchies. You take that every single time from your ace. Cole Ragans outdueled Corbin Burnes. Just absolutely lethal stuff. And the bullpen, which we're going to talk about in the second segment, coughed it up. So you're just infuriated with the way the game went. But it's hard to explain to people that with a 2-4 record, you still feel pretty good about the direction of this club. They once again have a positive run differential. It's 6 games, but it's something to take away. Like the Angels have a bad offense. Their pitching has been okay. They have a negative run differential. They're in first place in the American League West. It's why sometimes you can see teams losing close games. You take it not as a moral victory, but the pendulum could have swung the other way. And I was sold that the pendulum had swung completely in favor of the Royals yesterday after Maikel Garcia once again hit a home run. Launched the ball into the air, but this time to the opposite field, right center, and he goes about 10 rows up. Maikel Garcia, who we are slowly starting to see just how talented of a player he can become. And maybe I should walk that back and not say slowly. Quickly, we are learning the type of player he can be. He's got 3 home runs in 6 games. He had 4 all of last year. He is launching the ball in the air. He is hitting the ball incredibly hard. He is playing a great defense over at third base. And that's why for tonight's game, with the Royals entering at 2-4 and not 5-1 if the bullpen didn't implode, you feel good about where they're at because they're starting to accumulate a lot of these talented guys. Mark Feinstein did a report or a story actually yesterday on baseball's executives being able to vote on breakout players for 2024. The Royals had 3 guys with multiple votes. Vinny Pasquantino had 4, and Garcia and Reagans both had multiple votes. Now, the system was a little bit weird because Gunnar Henderson led with 5 votes, but he won American League Rookie of the Year last year, so I don't really think he's a breakout candidate. The Royals picks, though, those would all be breakout candidates. Even though Cole Reagans is a stud, he only did it for half a year last year, so he would be a stereotypical bounce-back candidate. Vinny Pasquantino, same thing. He was hurt all of last year, but Maikel Garcia, I think, fits that bill. I mean, the Royals would have been satisfied with Maikel Garcia if he was just elite defensively at third base and was like a slap hitter. Like, in years past, I think the Royals would have been very satisfied with that. Like, Nicky Lopez is a perfect example. Nicky Lopez was an elite defender, Gold Glove caliber, but he wasn't that great of a hitter. He was, at times just a slap hitter. Sometimes he would get hot, but he was a singles hitter. But for third base, it is important that Maikel Garcia has tapped into this power a little bit because third base is a power position, right? And Maikel Garcia, when he came into the league, was very scrawny, only about $165, $170. But even in the small stature, he had the bat speed, he had the torque, he hit the ball hard. And we all thought last year, with as good and as impressed as we were by Maikel Garcia, it was like, what if he starts lifting the ball? Because that exit velocity is going to carry. If you get under a couple of those, you're not just hitting a line drive to center field. You're not just hitting a hard ground ball through the 6-4 gap. Or you're not hitting a line drive through the hole at third and short. No, you're feeling like, man, if he's just a tick under it, the ball's leaving the yard. And that's exactly what's happening through 6 games. It's very impressive to see. And at the end of the day, it is 6 games, right? You don't know if this power is going to translate for 162. You'd like for it to happen. But all these advanced metrics would tell you that he is on the cusp of becoming a very well-known player around the league. And that's great to see because he's homegrown. Right, the left side of the Royals infield is homegrown, and they're 2 of the best hitters in the lineup. And that's why I leave this Baltimore series thinking, they coughed away 2. And I'm not going to make any excuses or celebrate a series loss. They've lost back-to-back series to begin the year. They've been in all 6 of their games. But I look at this upcoming series against the White Sox, and we'll talk about it in segment number 3, and I go, this is that chance for everybody to join the ranks of what Salvi and Bobby and Maikel are doing in the lineup. Oh, hell, I'll throw MJ Melendez in there. For the other guys, you get to face bad pitching. Excuse me. So I am feeling better today than I was last night just in the aftermath of the loss. Because I know that the way this roster has been constructed, the way the lineup's constructed, these aren't just guys that are outperforming expectation. They're guys that are starting to become what a lot of national scouts, executives think they can become. And that's when you know this team can be for real. That others outside your organization speak highly of the guys you have in your organization, have in your lineup, have in your rotation. Maikel Garcia is poised to have a really good year. If he stays healthy and this power continues to trend upward, he is going to be one of the better players, maybe not just in this lineup, but one of the better players in the American League. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. Let's pivot to this bullpen. And one guy in the bullpen who has been very costly in two of the losses the Royals have had this year. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to the title sponsor today in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. An eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Also want to give a shout out to the other sponsor today in Gametime. I'll be out at Kauffman Stadium tomorrow. Going to go with a group of people buying some tickets, and you guessed it, I'm going to be buying them over at Gametime because it's the best app to use when buying tickets, whether you're going to a baseball game, going to a football game, a basketball game, a concert, a comedy show. It doesn't really matter. They got you covered with all the best deals, the cheapest deals, the best seats. They have it all over at Gametime. So here is what you need to do. Go and download the Gametime app today, and limited users can get $20 off. Limited time, all users, it said limited users. For a limited time, all users can get $20 off on an MLB purchase of $150 or more in the Gametime app with code FIRSTPITCH. Those terms apply, so that's code FIRSTPITCH, FIRSTPITCH, for $20 off from March 25th to April 14th. So you still got about 10 days before this deal is over. $20 off when you have a purchase of $150 or more. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Well, the overarching feeling about the Royals through 2024 has been a really good rotation. You can't complain. They've given up 6 runs in total, and we're already through the second time. Cole Reagans has thrown twice. Seth Lugo will get his second start tonight. He'll be going up against Mike Soroka of the Chicago White Sox. He had 6 shutout innings in his debut in a Royals uniform. Can't complain about the rotation. The lineup, though people were upset with them through 2 games, they've been fine. They've been doing enough to win baseball games. The group that has not been doing enough so far through 6 games is the bullpen. The bullpen has been an unmitigated disaster. And I won't sugarcoat that. And I had an episode yesterday where I said things will even out. And I believe they will. I still have to stand on that. 1 game can't do it for me. You know, I know how long this season is. And as I've stated multiple times, and people get upset when I say we're living game to game right now. The Royals win tonight. The people that were negative yesterday feel really positive. They lose the next night. We're back to square one. And that's going to continue as long as the Royals are contending. If they lose 10 in a row, the negative people and the positive people are not going to care anymore. They're not going to be content, or they're going to be content with losing. They're not going to be content with putting that much effort into a baseball team that's already out of contention. But I still feel like they're there. I still feel like they are competing at a high level. And the bullpen has ripped away 3 games from them already. They're the difference between 5-1 and 2-4. If you put Detroit's bullpen in Kansas City, the Royals are 5-1. That's just A simple fact. Detroit's bullpen is elite. It's why they're the only undefeated team in baseball left. Now, they've had back-to-back games rained out, so who knows if they would have beat the Mets or not. But still, Detroit assembled a really good bullpen. The Royals spent money on their bullpen, but the guys they paid to be in high-leverage spots have not pitched well. Only John Schreiber, who was traded for, and the Royals gave up one of their top prospects for, or at least a top 20 prospect. John Schreiber's been the only good arm in the bullpen. And maybe tonight, if the Royals are in a save situation, they'll turn to John Schreiber. I have 90% confidence it's not going to be Will Smith because he struggled. He's also pitched back-to-back days. I think Matt Quatraro is going to want to take some pressure off of him and not throw him. But let's start there with Will Smith. And I think why so many people have a right, number one, to be infuriated with what Will Smith has given you, especially after last night, the way that he blew that game. And it wasn't so much of the stuff. Like, I get the velocities down. I get that they weren't biting on his 75-mile-an-hour curveball. To me, it was the inefficiency in the zone. I had tweeted it out earlier in the day that what had impressed me so much about the rotation was that they were so efficient through 6 innings. They were getting through the first 18 outs and 70 to 75 pitches, like just pounding the zone over and over and over again. And the bullpen's not doing that, or at least not Will Smith. Will Smith opened a 1-run game in the ninth against the best team in the American League with a 4-pitch walk. It can't happen. It just simply cannot happen if you're a closer. And it can be happening when you throw 88 to 90 miles an hour. If you're going to throw that soft, you have to be in the zone. You have to have pinpoint control if you're a closer. Now, Will Smith's stuff can play as a long reliever, but he had 22 saves last year. The Royals signed him to be the closer, but his velocity is down 2 ticks. That can be the concerning part of this. But the wildness and missing your spots, I mean, James McCann had the walk-off hit not because Will Smith missed the location. It's because it was 2-0, and he had to throw a meatball down the middle. And when you're throwing 88 to 90, it's very hittable. Like, once Will Smith got down in the count there, I said it's a matter of time. James McCann's going to have to hit over the top of it and beat it into the ground, or he's going to have to get way under it and lift it up into the air. Those are the only 2 outcomes that would be beneficial for the Royals. But Will Smith, I don't know is going to be abandoned from the closer role just yet. I think the Royals in this series will have a chance to really give the bullpen some confidence and even things out. Not that it'll make you feel better about them, because the White Sox aren't a good baseball team. And we'll talk about that in the third segment. But Will Smith, simply put right now, is not the guy you can turn to. James McArthur hasn't been great, but his stuff can play as a closer. I would feel much better in a 1-run game with James McArthur out there than I would Will Smith. You know, even in the one outing he had that was clean, a 1-2-3 inning, and that was on Tuesday night, the first batter he faced was Adley Rutschman, and Adley Rutschman hit a ball that was a home run in 29 of 30 parks. It's not like he was throwing that to go, well, let's get him to hit it to left field, crush it, but it'll stay in because of how big left field is at Camden Yards. Like, Will Smith hasn't been good in any 3 of his outings. And like I said earlier with the rotation, they've given up 6 runs, and they're now at start 7 tonight, 6 runs in 6 starts. Will Smith has given up 6 runs in 3 outings. He's had 1 clean frame. Right now, he's not the answer. And I'm very curious tonight if the Royals are in a save situation, who they would turn to. Because the problem is, and I was talking to a couple people on Twitter yesterday of, well, if it's not Will Smith, who really gives you confidence right now? You know, because John Schreiber could be the closer. John Schreiber is also the fireman right now. He's the first out of the bullpen. He's bridging the gap. He was supposed to bridge the gap to your 7, 8, and 9 guys. You thought that Nick Anderson could be a 7th inning guy, and Chris Stratton. Those guys can. But right now, there's no sure thing in the bullpen. Schreiber's had his struggles. Schreiber's had 1 clean frame, just like Will Smith. Now, he hasn't given up any runs, but he's also dealt with base runners on. He hasn't had the best command in some of his outings. Right now, the bullpen is a bit of a mess. I think it evens out. I think it gets better. And really what I'm asking for is when the Royals play bad teams, the bullpen's got to be good. They have to be able to lock down those games that should be gimmies. In the games against Baltimore, Minnesota, Cleveland, Houston, the Yankees, the Dodgers. In those games, you hope that in a 4-game series, 2 of those nights, they can lock it down for you. Like, that's just the bare minimum you're asking for, because the Royals right now don't have a good bullpen. So you're hoping when things even out, they're 15th in the league. They're 16th in the league. They're 17th in the league. They're just good enough to keep you competitive. If they're bottom 5 in the league, it's going to be really tough for the Royals to win any close 1 to 2 run game, even if the rotation's dominant and the lineup does their job. What you're hoping for at that point is the Royals enter the 9th inning up 7-2, 6-2, 8-3. They can't really blow it. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but it just gives the bullpen a little bit more of a cushion. Right now, 1-run leads are not safe. And I think we're fully aware of that. And the problem is the most untrustworthy guy in the bullpen is the guy you're supposed to be trusting the most in your 9th inning closer, or you're just your closer in general. The setup guy and the closer have been the 2 biggest disasters for the Royals in terms of giving up runs in 2024. Who will they go to tonight if the Royals and White Sox game presents Kansas City with a save opportunity? I guess we'll have to wait and see and find out. Before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's take a deep dive into this 4-game series against the bottom team in the Central, the Chicago White Sox, a.k.a. the 2018-2019 Kansas City Royals. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15 and find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to the final sponsor today, in PrizePicks. Spring training is over and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entry today. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks, as well as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. The playoffs begin April 20th, and the play-in round is April 16th, 17th, and 19th. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for a first deposit match of up to $100. Well, the Royals are back home tonight, and they will be back for a homestand of 7 games. They will see the Chicago White Sox for 4 over this weekend, and they'll see the Houston Astros early next week to round out that homestand before heading off to Flushing to take on the Mets on the road, and then they'll see the White Sox on the road as well. So a little bit of a relief for a Royals team that just took on back-to-back defending division champs. They have a perfect opportunity in this 4-game set to just take all their anger and their frustration out of blowing 2 games in Baltimore on a bad White Sox team. I know that Chicago just beat maybe the National League favorite in Atlanta in game 2 of that series. Then game 3 was rained out yesterday. But this just is not a great team. And it could always bite me in the butt. Though there's no Locked On White Sox channel, hoping for that in the future so that we can complete the American League Central. But if I was to get burned, I would hope for the White Sox Locked On host to definitely call me out on that. But you look at their lineup top to bottom. It is very similar to a 2018-2019 Royals lineup. And their offense has showed early on it's not good enough to compete with a lot. They are praying and hoping that their starting pitching can give them a 1-run cushion late in the game. And they were able to shut things down against Atlanta in game 2. Maikel Garcia threw like 40 pitches in a 4-out save. So they're burning some guys just to get that 1 win early on. And that reminds me a lot of Mike Matheny. So that's not a good sign for the Chicago White Sox, who, of course, are managed by Pedro Grifol, former Royals bench coach. This is your chance, really, to show the difference between where you're at and where the White Sox are. I'm not saying you need a 4-game sweep and you need to outscore them by 20 runs, but I think dominating the White Sox in half of these games and winning 3 of 4 is pretty important. I don't think I'm going to be satisfied with splitting a series with this White Sox team. I mean, top to bottom, if I can read you off the lineup, and you're going to notice a few Royals in this list, and I'm doing this on the fly as we speak. But this White Sox lineup that'll be going up against Seth Lugo, Brady Singer, Michael Wacha, and Alec Marsh is one that is not putting up any good numbers. They're a lineup that is kind of relying on solo home run just to give them some runs. They've got Luis Robert, and that's about it. Andrew Benintendi is hitting 150. Yohan Moncada is hitting 263, so I'll give the nod there. Of course, Luis Robert's an absolute superstar and a stud. Gavin Sheets is hitting 167. Andrew Vaughn's hitting 188. Paul DeYoung's hitting 182. Dominic Fletcher's hitting .091. Kevin Pillar doesn't have a hit. Nicky Lopez is hitting 167. And Martin Maldonado doesn't have a hit either. It is a lineup that is not built to beat teams in a shootout. And the rotation is not really built to hold down lineups to 3 runs or less over 6 innings. They're not going to compile a lot of quality starts. The Royals will face Mike Soroka tonight. Mike Soroka, we all know about his injury-riddled career. He's only made 11 starts in the last 3 years. He's had 1 full season, and that was with Atlanta in 2019. He was really good, but since then just has been banged up all the time. He missed, in fact, I said last 3 years. He threw in 2020, the COVID year, then didn't pitch again until last season. So he's more of a project than anything. And in his last start, he gave up 4 runs in 5 innings on 7 hits, and that was against Detroit. Then the Royals are going to see Eric Fedde, who I did want the Royals to sign in the offseason. He's coming over from Japan. He was electric, and I thought he was fine in his first start, but not the type of pitchers the Royals have been seeing in their first 2 series of the year. It's not a Pablo Lopez. It's not a Joe Ryan. It's not a Corbin Burns. It's not some guys that are really top end, at least in the American League. Then on Saturday, they're going to get Chris Flexen. Chris Flexen has an 8.31 ERA. Then they will get the White Sox ace, and I'm curious how this game will go. And Garrett Crochet, who has just been electric, lights out. I didn't know if the velocity was going to play from the bullpen to the starting rotation. Seems like it is early on, but I am a little bit concerned about injuries for him because it has been a problem for him just as a reliever. Now you're asking him to be the number 1 in the rotation. I don't know how long that is going to last. The benefit, though, is you're back at home. You're back at home. It's going to be good weather. You're not dealing with the crappy conditions that you dealt with in Baltimore. I think you've got the favorable pitching matchups. And then you'll be welcoming the Houston Astros after an off day on Monday, it looks like it is. And then you'll get them for 3, and then you'll head off to Flushing to take on the Mets next weekend. But this is your opportunity. This is your chance to really beat up on a bad team. And that has not been presented to the Royals the last 5 years. They were the bad team. They were the team that when they came to town, it was, all right, take out our frustration for blowing a couple games against great teams. Let's just beat the tar out of the Royals. This is the Royals' chance. Division rival. They don't like the White Sox. They've got the favorable pitching matchups. They can come in here and mop the floor with a bad White Sox team. I'm not saying the Royals sweep them in 4, but the goal needs to be taking 3. The goal needs to be taking this series. The White Sox are not good enough, and you can't call yourself good enough as the Royals if you walk away with a split. I'm not going to be too satisfied if the Royals end this series at 4-6. Bare minimum got to be 5-5. Of course, best case scenario would be 6-4 through 10 games after a 4-game sweep of the Chicago White Sox. Again, I'll be out there on Friday, so go buy your tickets on Gametime so we can pack Kauffman Stadium for the first Friday night game of the year. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me that follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the Free Fire TV Channels app. Tomorrow, we're going to have another edition of a Mailbag Friday. We'll probably send it out after the game tonight, so we'll have some more content to go over. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.